The soldiers in the trench had a rule: never look toward the White Ridge. Men who looked toward the White Ridge stopped existing shortly afterward, usually before they even heard the shot. Whole patrols walked out along that tree line and came back one man short, sometimes two, and nobody could point to where the shots had actually come from. Nobody saw him, nobody found him. By the time the war ended, one man hiding in the snow had killed more people with a rifle than anyone in recorded history. That is only one of 11 snipers who turned a single weapon into a battlefield of their own. A quick note before we start. Some of these numbers come from official military records, cross-checked and confirmed long after the fact. Others come from wartime propaganda, second-hand claims, or accounts nobody was in a position to verify at the time. Where a figure is disputed, or where two sources flatly disagree, I will say so plainly instead of just picking the more dramatic version. The confirmed ones are already hard enough to believe on their own. Number 11. Billy Singh. In 1915, an Australian stockman with a reputation as a crack shot back home found himself dug into the cliffs above Gallipoli, a campaign that mostly rewarded men for staying still and dying quietly. Singh did the opposite. Working with a spotter, he picked off Ottoman soldiers across the ravine at Anzac Cove for months, earning the nickname the Assassin from his own side and, according to some accounts, a bounty on his head from the other. His officially recognized total sits around 150, though contemporary newspaper reports pushed it considerably higher, and nobody today can fully separate the real number from the legend that grew around him. Ottoman command, by some accounts, wanted him dead more than almost anyone else on the peninsula, and reportedly sent a Turkish counter-sniper of their own to hunt him down. That duel supposedly ended with Singh wounded but alive and the other man dead, though the details rest on soldiers' letters rather than anything official. He was hit twice more before the campaign ended and came home a decorated soldier, only to spend the last years of his life broke, running a small farm and largely forgotten by the country that once printed his name in the papers. A quiet, complicated ending for a man who spent a war being famous to the exact people trying to kill him. Number 10. Henry Norwest, a Métis soldier from Alberta. Norwest joined the Canadian Army in 1915 and became one of the most effective marksmen in the entire Canadian Expeditionary Force. He worked alone for hours at a stretch, sometimes crawling through no man's land before dawn to reach a firing position, then staying there until dark without moving, waiting for one shot he might not get all day. His tally stands at 115, an extraordinary figure for the era, and it earned him the Military Medal with Bar. Fellow soldiers described him as almost silent in the field, capable of holding one position through an entire shift of shelling without shifting his weight once. In August 1918, near Warvillers, a German counter-sniper finally spotted him first. Norwest was killed instantly, without warning, doing the exact thing he had done successfully for 3 straight years. His commanding officer wrote that the loss hit the battalion harder than almost any other casualty of the war, which says something about a man whose entire job description was staying invisible. Number 9. Francis Pegahmagabow, an Ojibwe soldier from Ontario. Pegahmagabow enlisted in 1914 and finished the war as the most effective sniper and scout in Canadian service. Credited with 378 kills, some accounts push the number higher, along with roughly 300 enemy soldiers captured on top of that. He survived Ypres, the Somme, and Passchendaele, 3 of the deadliest engagements of the entire conflict, largely by slipping through contested ground at night to gather intelligence nobody else could reach. Gas caught him once. Shrapnel caught him 3 separate times. Each time, once he could stand again, he asked to go back rather than take the transfer home he had clearly earned, as if the war owed him a rematch and he intended to collect. He came home with the Military Medal and 2 bars, one of the most decorated Indigenous soldiers in Canadian history, and then spent the rest of his life fighting for the rights of the community that had sent him overseas in the first place. The government he had served was, at best, ungrateful for the favor. Number 8. Ivan Sidorenko, a Soviet marksman on the Eastern Front. Sidorenko is officially credited with 500 kills, a figure that would place him among the deadliest snipers of the entire war, assuming Soviet paperwork from that period holds up to modern scrutiny, which is never a safe assumption. What is easier to verify is his influence. He trained dozens of other snipers during the fighting, spreading his technique through Red Army units at a scale most individual marksmen never approach. In 1944, Near the town he had spent months defending, a severe wound took the use of his legs and ended his time on the front line for good, though he lived through the rest of the war and on into the 1980s, teaching from a wheelchair long after he could no longer hold a rifle steady himself. Soviet wartime figures are notoriously hard to check against outside sources, and Sidorenko's total sits in that same fog along with most of his contemporaries. The one thing nobody disputes is that the Red Army treated him as one of its sharpest instruments and built training programs directly around what he had already worked out alone, in the cold, with nobody watching. Number 7. Adelbert Waldron. An American serving with the 9th Infantry Division in Vietnam, Waldron holds the highest confirmed count of any United States sniper in that war. 109 kills. Most of them earned in the Mekong Delta, where dense vegetation and river terrain made engagements close and immediate rather than the long, patient work the job usually depends on. He operated from small boats along the waterways, adjusting for glare off the water, drifting currents, and cover that shifted with every bend in the river. Conditions that broke plenty of otherwise skilled shooters before they ever got comfortable. The Distinguished Service Cross came after an action where his boat was ambushed at close range and he stood up under direct fire, in full view, to kill multiple attackers and protect the rest of the crew, in a firefight where hiding was no longer an option worth considering. He made it home. Very little about his life afterward is public record, which feels like its own kind of quiet ending for a man whose entire job depended on nobody ever noticing him doing it. Number 6. Lyudmila Pavlichenko. Credited with 309 kills, Pavlichenko fought through the sieges of Odessa and Sevastopol before a wound pulled her from combat, at which point the Soviet government did something nobody expected and sent her on a publicity tour of the United States. She met Eleanor Roosevelt, who became a friend and later visited her in the Soviet Union. She toured American cities to packed halls that had never heard a woman describe combat firsthand. One reporter reportedly asked whether her uniform made her look unfeminine, a question she handled with far more patience than it deserved. Behind the tour sat a genuinely brutal service record. Hundreds of confirmed kills, earned under siege conditions where ammunition, food, and basic survival were never guaranteed from one day to the next. She went home once the war ended, trained a new generation of snipers, and lived until 1974, remembered as one of the deadliest combatants of any background in the entire conflict. Number 5. Vasily Zaitsev. During the siege of Stalingrad in 1942, Zaitsev is credited with 225 kills over roughly a month of fighting so close that the front line sometimes ran through a single building, floor by floor, room by room. Soviet accounts describe a personal duel between Zaitsev and a German counter-sniper sent specifically to eliminate him, a story that later inspired a well-known film and, because of that fame, is now one of the hardest wartime accounts on this list to fully separate from myth. Better documented is the environment he actually fought in: constant artillery. Collapsed buildings turned into firing positions overnight. A battle so dense that snipers on both sides measured distances in dozens of meters rather than hundreds, close enough to hear each other move. He trained other marksmen during the fighting itself, spreading his methods through the ranks the same way Sidorenko had, and made it out despite a severe eye injury near the war's end. Number 4. Craig Harrison. In 2009, a British Army corporal in Afghanistan fired 2 consecutive shots that struck a Taliban machine gun crew at a distance of 2,475 meters, over a mile and a half, using a rifle calibrated for roughly half that range. The shots required accounting for wind, humidity, the curvature of the earth, and the bullet's own drop across several seconds of flight time, adjustments that pushed well past anything the weapon was designed to reliably manage. Harrison later said he did not immediately register what had just happened, that the whole thing felt closer to solving an equation on paper than fighting an actual battle, and that the strangest part was how quiet it all felt from that far away. The record held for years afterward and remains one of the most scrutinized long-range shots in military history, verified by spotters, unit logs, and the rifle's own recorded data, which is exactly why it holds up better than nearly any figure on this list built on raw body count alone. Number 3. Chris Kyle. A United States Navy SEAL credited with 160 kills over 4 deployments in Iraq, Kyle became known among American troops as the Legend and, from the other direction, reportedly earned a bounty from insurgent forces that climbed with every tour. He worked dense urban combat in cities like Fallujah and Ramadi, perched on rooftops for hours at a stretch, providing overwatch for ground units moving through some of the most contested streets of that entire war. His total ranks among the highest of any American sniper in modern combat, and unlike much of this list, it comes from a conflict documented in real time, with military logs, unit records, and living witnesses rather than decades of retelling and guesswork. Kyle made it through every deployment and was killed in 2013, not overseas, but at a shooting range in Texas, by a fellow veteran he was trying to help. Number 2, Carlos Hathcock, a Marine sniper in Vietnam officially credited with 93 kills, though his real number was likely far higher given how strict confirmation standards were at the time. Hathcock became something close to a legend inside his own war while he was still fighting it. He once crawled over 1,000 meters through open grass across 4 straight days, without sleep, to reach a firing position and eliminate an enemy general. He moved inches at a time. A patrol stepped directly over him at one point and kept walking, never once looking down. On another occasion, he shot a rival sniper sent specifically to kill him through the man's own rifle scope, a story confirmed in Hathcock's own account and backed by fellow Marines present that day. Years later, he pulled fellow Marines from a burning vehicle and took severe burns doing it, an injury that ended his career but never, according to everyone who served alongside him, touched his nerve. Number 1. Simo Häyhä. During the Winter War of 1939 and 1940, a Finnish farmer-turned-soldier killed an estimated 505 Soviet troops in roughly 100 days, almost entirely using iron sights instead of a scope, since a scope's glint in the snow could give away his exact position. Soviet troops reportedly called him White Death and tried again and again to eliminate him with counter-snipers and artillery barrages aimed at suspected coordinates. None of it worked. He operated in temperatures well below freezing, dressed head to toe in white, crawling into position before dawn and staying motionless for hours at a stretch. He kept snow packed in his mouth so his own breath would not fog the air and give him away. He ate almost nothing, moved even less, and let the cold do half the work of hiding him. In March 1940, an enemy round hit him in the jaw and nearly killed him, ending his time on the front days before the war itself ended. He pulled through, recovered slowly over the following years, and lived until 2002. Unlike almost every other name on this list, his record is backed by Finnish military documentation kept in real time rather than reconstructed decades later, which is exactly why the number that sounds the most impossible is also the one that holds up best under scrutiny. Every name on this list did the same basic thing under wildly different conditions. A rifle, a fixed position, and enough discipline to stay still long enough for one shot to matter more than an entire unit's worth of firepower. Some of them are backed by paperwork you could hand to a historian without blinking. Others survive mostly on reputation, second-hand letters, and numbers nobody was in a position to double-check at the time. Both kinds still shape the battles around them, whether or not the exact count on the tally sheet is right. Armies plan around numbers, supply lines, and overwhelming force, on the assumption that enough people pointed in the same direction will eventually win. And then, somewhere in the snow, or the Delta, or a collapsing building in Stalingrad, one person with a scope and a lot of patience turns all of that math upside down,